You are now listening to Chris Talks to Everyone.
Buddy Leach,
Yeah.
thank you for coming and sitting down with me today. I really appreciate it. This is technically my first real episode because the other ones I've done have had some audio issues. So
Okay.
I spent a lot of money trying to make sure I dialed it up for you. But, I wanted to bring you in and talk to you because as many times as we've talked, there's a lot of legends of Buddy Leach. I don't know if you know that about yourself.
No.
Very, everybody is like, oh, he's very, very stoic. He's very straight-faced. He looks at you kind of, you're not sure what he's thinking or what he might want to say or what he might not want to say. But the longer you're around you, the more you realize, like, that's just Buddy's face. He's just as a very, he has a very matter-of-fact kind of way. But there's, everything you've ever heard about Buddy has always been true. He's just a very good-hearted, nice man that just has lived an extraordinary life so far. Do you feel like that? Do you feel like you might have lived an extraordinary life?
No.
Not at all?
No.
Well, let's get into it a little bit. So tell me a little bit about Buddy. Obviously, you're from like Middle Tennessee, basically, west to middle. West.
I was born in Florida.
Oh, really?
My dad was in the Air Force.
Okay.
He was enlisted in the Air Force. He worked on airplanes, and I was born at Eglin Air Force Base.
Okay.
And we moved from there to Colorado Springs, not Colorado Springs, Denver.
Okay.
When the Air Force Academy started, they put it at Denver, at Buckley Air Force Base.
Okay.
And he was out there, stationed there, when it started.
Did he retire from the Air Force?
No. We moved back to Tennessee when I was 3, so 59.
Okay.
And he got in the reserves and was in the reserves in Memphis for a while.
Okay.
But he didn't stick with it.
Yeah.
But he used his GI Bill to get his pilot's license.
Okay. So he became a private pilot.
He became a private pilot.
Who did he end up
commercial
flying for?
license. He didn't.
Oh, okay.
He
But
just
he had
did it
his
for
license.
fun. Yeah.
Oh.
He owned a few airplanes,
Oh.
different ones. And when he was taking his flying lessons, I would go and sit in the back and ride along with him.
Okay. And then maybe that's how you...
That's where I got my interest in flying.
So then, obviously, you are an Air Force veteran.
Yes.
What... Was that kind of like you knew right then, I think I'm going to join the Air Force one day? Or... Because at the time...
No.
Nobody else... I don't even know... When did the Air Force form?
1947.
Okay. So it was formed before you were born. But,
Yeah.
obviously, most people were flying for the Army originally, because that was...
Originally,
Yeah.
because it was the Army Air Forces.
Oh, okay.
But in 47, it became a separate service.
So at what point did you say to yourself, I'm going to join the Air Force?
Well, after I got to flying with them and I got interested in flying, I decided I wanted to go to the Air Force Academy. And that's really the only college I ever applied to.
Oh, okay.
At the last minute, I did apply to a local college up there, but I put all my everything in one basket there, trying to get into the Air Force Academy.
Yeah.
Of course, it's not an easy process, and I probably couldn't get in now. If it was the same now as it is then,
Right.
I probably wouldn't have got in.
So you go to the Air Force Academy, and how old were you when you went in?
It was about a month after I graduated from high school, so I was 17. I turned 18 5 days after I got there.
Okay. Yeah, it's about like me. I was 17 when I graduated and turned 18 a month later.
Yeah.
So you get there. Obviously, your goal is to become a pilot.
Yeah.
And you're on that path, go through the training, everything that needs to be done. How long does it take for you to become a captain?
Well, the Air Force Academy is a 4-year university.
Okay.
It's just like
like a regular
college.
college.
Yeah, a 4-year college. You come out with a bachelor's degree and you get a commission as a commissioned officer in the Air Force.
Okay.
So you become a second lieutenant when you graduate from the academy. And then it's normally 4 years to captain.
Yeah. So you get, obviously, 4 years worth. You've been flying several different types of planes, I'm sure. No?
No,
Same
you don't
plane?
fly. Well, you take a screening course at the academy, and you just we flew 172s, Cessna 172s.
Okay.
There, they were souped up 172s because of the altitude.
Right.
They were called T-41s,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
but we flew those, and that's just a screening process. And then, as long as you passed that, you had a chance to apply for pilot training, undergraduate pilot training. And I got a slot to undergraduate pilot training. It started in November after I graduated in May of '78. And then I was in class 8001, so we were in class from November of 78 to November 79. So it's a year-long school.
Okay.
And you fly T-30, well, back then, you flew T-37s and T-38s. You flew T-37s for the first 4 months, and then you flew T-38s for the rest of the course.
Now, what kind of planes are those? Are those?
T-37 is a small twin-engine jet, side-by-side seating
Okay.
with a bubble nose. And T-38 is a sleek, it's what the Thunderbirds flew back then.
Okay.
It's a sleek tandem seating, two-seated jet with small wings. It's a supersonic airplane.
So really, once you got out of the Cessnas, were you done with propeller planes at that time?
Yeah.
So it's all been jet since then.
Well, I flew a turboprop too.
Oh, did you?
Yeah,
Was that an Air Force thing, or was
Yeah.
that okay?
C-130.
Oh, okay. So is that what you went to fly whenever you finished the training?
No,
part of it?
whenever I finished training, I wanted a 130, but they wanted me to come back as an instructor in a T-38, so I did that.
How long were you an instructor for?
I was an instructor for 4 years. And
So,
then,
as an instructor, and obviously, I mean, you've not been out of being in the school very long,
Yeah.
and now all of a sudden you're coming back as an instructor.
yeah.
What's that transition like to just be now you're the guy in charge?
It's definitely a learning process.
Yeah.
And my first student was a Saudi student that didn't understand English very much. I mean, we got along, but there were times when we didn't understand each other because we couldn't see each other either.
Right.
He was in the front seat and I was in the back.
Oh. That has to be
It was
probably one of the
interesting
most
at times.
nervous times ever, to be trying to teach somebody who doesn't understand you, can't see you, and hoping that they can just fly this plane at least.
Yeah.
Enough to where we make it back to the ground.
Yeah.
So, you're saying he's a Saudi student.
Mm-hmm.
Is he? So obviously he's not part of the American Air Force.
No, we had exchange students.
Okay.
The Saudis at that time would send their students over to America for training.
Okay.
And we had a couple of flights down in, each squadron is divided into flights, and my flight was one that had Saudi students in it. We had 3 in that class.
So, if he's over here flying the planes that you're in, what does he end up going back to fly? Do they bring planes at all for them, and you go in their planes?
No,
Or no?
Once they graduated from pilot training here, then they would go to a transition course, F-15 fighter jets mainly.
Yeah. Did you ever fly fighter jets?
I didn't, no.
Never.
T-38 is closest I got.
But you did fly C-130s for a short time.
I did.
How long was that?
Well, once I finished pilot training, I did get my 130. Or once I finished my tour as an instructor,
Okay.
I did get my 130, and I flew that for 2 years.
And was it all stateside, or were you
No,
deployed?
we would deploy overseas.
Yeah. Now, how long after? So you said 2 years in the C-130, and then at what point did you transition from the C-130 to something bigger?
I didn't go to something bigger. Actually, at the end of my 130 tour, I went overseas not flying. I was working in a command post in Osan, Korea.
So
for a year.
What are you doing in a non-flying role? I mean, the whole point was for
Coordinating the airlift across the country of Korea,
you to fly. Okay.
South Korea. We would command and control
Okay.
for all the military airlift command
Is that something you
aircraft.
volunteered for, or
No.
it was more of a?
It wasn't something I volunteered for.
It was like, come on in, buddy.
Yeah.
We'll bring you over here and do this.
They told me that I had had my second tour in the United States, and I needed a overseas tour.
Okay. So you did that for a year?
Yeah, I did that for a year.
And then do you get a choice at that point? Like, okay, I've done this. Because I know that you can sign up and hope get like a certain base or, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
But as far as you finished that tour in Korea, like, do you have an idea of choice of where you wanted to go next? Or was it more of a...
Well, let me back up to when I was finishing my T-38 tour
Okay.
as an instructor. They came to, I was at Columbus, Mississippi. They came down there recruiting for the U-2. Up until that time, you had to have experience in 2 different airplanes
Okay.
to fly the U-2, but they were opening it up to first assignment instructor pilots because they thought that was good experience flying an airplane as an instructor in your first assignment.
Right.
So I thought about going to the U-2 at that point, but I thought, well, I've always wanted to fly a 130, so I went ahead and flew the 130. Now, when I went overseas to Osan, the U-2s had a detachment in Osan, and they flew out of there. And I got to know some of the guys that were flying the airplane there, and I decided again that I might consider that. And at that time, I did actually apply for the airplane.
Okay.
And then that's one, it's a special duty assignment, and you have to have an interview. You actually fly the airplane, and the instructor decides whether he thinks you can learn to fly the airplane, because it's a difficult airplane to fly,
Yeah.
to land specifically.
Well, obviously, yeah.
And I went for the interview, and I was selected to fly it. So that's what I went to after I finished my 1-year Osan remote tour.
And so what year is this is happening? So you leave Osan and go to U-2?
85 to 86 was my Osan career, my Osan assignment. And I went into, I got back the end of 86
Okay.
at Osan
And then,
and started training there.
so you stayed in Korea for the U-2 then?
No.
No. You
No.
came back stateside for that?
It came back stateside. They're stationed at Beale Air Force Base in California,
Okay.
Northern California.
So then when did you become just an actual U-2 pilot? So you applied for it, you've done all the interview process per se, and now you're actually in training, I guess, for it.
There's a training program. They had some 2-seat U-2s out there that we flew. You would fly in the front seat, and the instructor would be in the back, just like we did in the T-38.
Right.
And they had 6 flights before you soloed,
Yeah.
just pattern rides where you go in and do takeoffs and landings the entire time. And then after that, you would do a couple of high altitude sorties with your instructor, and then you would be by yourself.
When you're saying high altitude, how high are we
Well,
talking? Are you allowed to say how high you
Their
can go?
distinction was above 60,000 and below 60,000. Anything below 60,000 feet was a low altitude flight. Anything above was a high altitude flight.
And most commercial jets were flying like 36, 37,000 feet.
Yeah.
So low altitude for you guys is almost double what they're flying. So you're doing high altitude flights over 60,000 feet. What's that? First time you do that, how can you even... I mean, I saw the Grand Canyon. I can tell people about the Grand Canyon.
Yeah.
I still can never portray to them what you're seeing when you're seeing it. I can tell you all about it, but you don't understand it fully until you've actually seen it.
Yeah.
Is that kind of what it is like when
Yeah.
you're 60,000 feet above or plus above the earth?
You can see a lot of area,
Well, yeah.
but we had a view sight on the airplane where you could actually look straight down below the airplane, and you could magnify it some so you could see quite a bit of detail on the ground.
Even at 60,000 plus feet?
Yeah.
I mean, I have a hard time looking down when I'm on a ladder.
They had to have something like that because if you looked out the sides,
Yeah.
the airplane frame was the body of the airplane made it so that you could only see about 100 miles out.
Right.
You know, you couldn't see close.
Right.
So they had to have something so you could see underneath to pick out landmarks.
And so obviously the U-2 is a spy plane. You classify it as a spy plane when you're flying it?
It's a reconnaissance plane.
Reconnaissance plane. That's a good way to put it.
Reconnaissance platform.
So you're flying then in around like 87. So it's the Iraqi-Iran war, right?
No, that didn't start till 90.
Oh, did it? I thought it was in 87 is when it started. Because didn't he intervene in the war at some point? I'm going to trust your judgment. You know better than I do.
Well, the Iraq... we went into Iraq in 90.
Okay. Were you still flying the U-2 at that time?
I got out about a month before that started.
Oh. I feel like that was such
The
a
things
precipice time for you to
in
be going in.
87 was Panama.
Okay. So did you fly actual missions over, trying to think of the best way to say this. Aside from having like your regular missions, like training missions, were you flying actual like wartime missions yet? Because we didn't really have anything.
We had operational missions. How do I say this? There are a lot of treaties and things around the world
Right.
that the U.S. was involved in watching over the progress of or the situation in those areas.
Right.
Like I said, we had a detachment in Korea,
Right.
and we had a detachment in Florida, and we had a detachment over in the Mediterranean.
Yeah.
And that's about as far as I can go with that. You can
Sure. So you've been around.
You can see where you can figure out where we were flying.
Yeah, you've been around then.
But at that point in time, we were also big with war against drugs.
Right.
You know, so we had some.
It's hard to even fathom that. I mean, obviously, we want to use everything that's at our disposal.
Yeah.
Right. But in my mind, non-military person, but just an enthusiast of learning things, it's hard to even imagine that we're using a reconnaissance plane like the U-2 during the war on drugs. Like I know that it's happening, obviously now especially, but it's hard to imagine, they've got somebody like you up there flying, looking for cartel traffic or whatever. And I'm not saying that's what you did, but it just is it's crazy. It's crazy to think about. That's one of our most advanced planes that we know of, that I know of, that has ever been used. And to imagine that it was used in a time during the war on drugs, I mean, I don't know. I think that's not a normal everyday thing that somebody's going to think about. Like,
Maybe not.
Maybe not. You, because you were part of that life, maybe. It makes sense to you. But to me, I would have never even thought about that. So why, if you just started flying the U-2 around like 86, why only 4 years? Is there kind of a cutoff or?
No, I only flew it because I got out of the service at that point.
Oh, you did?
I got out of the service in 90.
Did you want to do that, or is there a cutoff at some point for you?
No, I could have probably stayed in that airplane the rest of my career if I wanted to stay. But things were happening in my life, and people were. My family was getting older.
Right.
My dad lost a brother, and I couldn't even come back for the funeral.
Yeah.
Things like that. And I also saw the way things were in the military, the politics, let's say.
Yeah.
And I decided just to get out of the service and come back home.
Yeah, it seems like it's always something where it's one way for a while, and then it starts transitioning, and you start seeing things changing, and then the guys that come in after you, they're used to the way it changes to for a while, and then once again it changes.
Yeah.
That makes them transition. So note to everyone listening, things change. It's the only thing that's guaranteed.
True.
The only thing that's guaranteed is that
True.
things are going to change.
When I was commissioned into the Air Force, I thought I would probably stay a career,
yeah.
stay 20 years and not get out. But at the 12-year point, actually the 11-year point, I decided to get out.
How tough is that of a decision to have been 11 years in and know that you only have 9 years left to
It's
to
a
fully
pretty tough
retire?
decision.
Yeah. Were you married at that point?
Yes.
You were?
I got married right out of the academy.
Oh, okay. So the entire time
I was
you've been married.
yeah.
And how many times did you have to move?
Well, we spent the first 6 months in Colorado Springs after I graduated.
Right.
And in that November, we moved to Columbus, Mississippi. And then we stayed there till 83. And we moved to Pope Air Force Base, North Carolina.
Okay.
And then we moved from there. Actually, I moved my family back here, back to our hometown, while I went overseas that 1 year.
Because how long were you in before you had your kids? How many kids do you have?
I have 2.
Okay. And how long were you in before you had the first one?
The first one was born 2 years after I started pilot training.
Okay.
And then the other one was born 3 years later.
Okay. So now she's moving around, 2 small kids. Was she working at all at the time?
No.
Such a different time back
Yeah.
then too, right?
Yeah.
Because I can't imagine. Do you remember what your salary was back then?
Not very much.
Probably.
We were
I can't imagine.
we were scrimping quite a bit.
Oh yeah.
We were living in an apartment complex out in Colorado Springs, and she actually worked out a deal with our landlord to do some painting
Yeah.
so that we didn't have to pay all our rent. And then we had a couple hailstorms out there. We had one that messed up our car pretty good, and we got a check from it. And she said, "Oh boy, I can go shopping." Groceries.
Yeah.
Yeah, not
Not
clothes
like
or
big
something like
shopping.
that, but groceries. That's what she thought of.
And then of course the car didn't get fixed.
No, it didn't. It didn't.
Let's be honest though. After a hailstorm, your car's beat like that.
Yeah.
It's not worth
there
putting
wasn't
the money
much-
back into
yeah.
it. It really is not. I had the same thing happen, and they cut me a check for $8,000. We can fix
Well,
it, or we can just give you
that much.
Well, this was also 2015
Yeah.
or 2014. And I remember sitting in the office and looking out in the parking lot saying, man, it's fixing to rain. And then I just started hearing doom, 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 and bigger than golf ball size hail was coming down, and my truck was just sitting out in front of my office by itself, beat to oblivion. I mean, nothing could have been done. So, funny, I traded it in, and another guy bought it locally, and he didn't get it fixed either. So I would see him all over town driving in this beat-up truck, So what was that like for her as far as you moving around? And what did she think about the fact that you were going to be flying this reconnaissance plane? Was it even did you realize, what kind of magnitude that was at the time?
I realized the history of the airplane,
Yeah.
and I thought that was really neat to be associated with an airplane like that.
Yeah.
And it's a small cadre even today.
Oh, yeah.
Not much over 1,000 people have ever flown it.
Yeah, I actually looked it up, so full disclosure, because I was
Okay.
like, I know Buddy flew the U-2, but I wonder when that was and so on and so forth. And I think your number 487.
484.
44.
Yeah.
That was close. So,
Yeah.
But that's another, like, if only 1,000 people have flown it and you're 484, that's it's such a small, unique number
Yeah.
in the grand scheme of things, because obviously there's thousands of planes in the air every day, Okay, so it's time for you to transition out of the military. And obviously you being a pilot, it's kind of a no-brainer. Now for your dad, though, it was not. He did not become a pilot.
No.
What did he end up doing when he got out?
He went to work for DuPont,
Okay.
and he worked for DuPont for 37 years.
And then just was a private pilot for himself on the side.
Yeah.
Did you guys take trips and like family trips in the plane or?
He and I did. He and I flew down to the coast a couple times,
Yeah.
back and forth, and he had a doctor friend up there in our hometown that he went flying with a lot,
Yeah.
and they were like brothers. They fought back and forth, and
Oh yeah.
just to hear them talk to each other, Pretty
Funny.
neat. Yeah, it was funny.
Is the doctor still alive now?
The doctor.
Yeah. Is he still alive?
Yeah, he's
Is
still
it?
alive
I know your dad recently passed away, right?
in August.
And so, what about his planes? Did he still have the planes?
No, he had sold me his last plane a few years ago.
Do you still have your plane?
I just sold it.
Did you?
Yeah.
How
Can't find time to fly it.
Well, I was going to say, how would you find time? But I would imagine this next year is going to be a lot of travel. Do you think to yourself, man, maybe should have the plane?
No.
You like driving?
No. But I don't like flying in the weather anymore.
Oh, yeah.
I don't plan to fly in any weather, anytime.
Yeah.
So you have to depend too much on the weather
Yeah.
when you're flying like that,
Yeah.
and it's just easier to drive.
What kind of plane was it?
It's just a small Citabria.
Okay.
It's a tandem two-seat tailwheel airplane,
Yeah.
high wing. It was a lot of fun just to fly around in, but not a traveling airplane.
Right. So after you got out of the military, obviously you moved back to this area.
Mm-hmm.
And with Memphis being the FedEx hub, I would imagine. Is that where you went to fly for FedEx?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know why I thought that United for some reason.
Well, I had two interviews. I had one with American Airlines and I had one with FedEx.
Okay.
But I had the American Airlines interview first.
Yeah.
And I actually got hired by them.
Mm-hmm.
But I kept holding out for FedEx because FedEx was here in Memphis.
Right.
And I had a training date at American, and I pushed it back as far as I could, and I finally did get a call from FedEx, so I went to FedEx.
Okay. So, and a lot of people probably don't realize that just because you were a captain in the Air Force and you were the number one guy there, doesn't necessarily mean that you're going in the door as a captain at a.
Oh no!
At a
you're going to go on the bottom of the list.
Right. So now you're deciding, okay, I'm going to go in here, and I've always been told from other FedEx pilots that the reason they went to FedEx was because it was the fastest way to become a captain for them.
Well,
I don't know how true that is, but I mean, it's been told to me multiple times.
It all depends on your timing.
Right.
And my timing was not good for that.
Really?
The people that were young captains then, when I got hired, they said, "Oh, you'll be a captain in 3 years."
Yeah.
It took me 12.
12 years to become
because they were hiring a bunch of people at that time.
Oh, yeah.
And they didn't have that many captain slots. They had a bunch of people that were captains already, and they weren't leaving. They weren't old enough to retire or anything, so there were no slots open.
Right. So.
And they also merged with Flying Tigers, which filled up a bunch of captain slots. So.
Who were the Flying Tigers?
Well, it was an airline.
Was it? Okay.
A cargo carrier.
Did they fly out of Memphis?
No.
No. Okay. I didn't know if that was just one of because obviously Memphis Tigers. I was like, maybe that's what they were.
Well, Flying Tigers was started back in right after World War II.
Okay.
And it was a big operation. They had merged with a couple of other airlines, but they had 747s, and my understanding is that FedEx wanted the 747s. They also had some routes that the FedEx wanted, and they weren't easy to get, some overseas routes. So
when you came in the door at FedEx, how old were you at the time?
I was 33.
Okay. And what a transition, too, by the way, because, you got a lot of people that go to college now, and I always tell people, like, college isn't for everybody. Trades are really good for most people, but college for you was very good because it was flying, which is almost guaranteed you're going to find a job when you're done with that. Then obviously had a great career in the Air Force, and now you're out flying for FedEx, who, everyone knows that name, FedEx. Yeah. There's obviously a clear path for career advancement there. What was your first route for FedEx, and what was that like?
I don't know the first route. My first job at FedEx was flight engineer. I didn't fly. I was a systems operator on the airplane.
So you just
sat sideways.
Yeah.
The two the captain and first officer sat up front.
Okay.
And the flight engineer sat. There was a panel back behind them, where all the systems showed and how you controlled all the systems, and that was the flight engineer job. That was my job. I did that for 5 years on the 727, and then moved to the DC-10 and did it, and then moved to the Airbus A300 in the right seat.
Okay. And then so once you actually became somebody who's sitting behind the stick, do you remember where you flew?
No.
You didn't have a direct route or anything just yet?
Flew all over.
Yeah. I know that some guys have those, they're only flying a certain route.
Not till they're senior.
Yeah, not till they're senior, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you just
That
were
takes
like,
a while.
anywhere you want me to go, I'll go. But the good thing about it is that you're here in the Memphis metro, you know. And so for you to go down there, did you have a specific time you had to show up every week, or how does it work?
It was, you normally showed up around 2 or 3 in the morning
Okay.
to take off an hour and a half later.
Okay.
The first year, I had no idea what the schedule was going to be like. So the first year we moved to Bartlett. We
Okay.
lived in Bartlett. And then after that, we moved back to our hometown.
Okay.
So I would try to bid, you always bid your schedules based on seniority.
Right.
And they have all kinds of different schedules. They have schedules where you can be home every night, but you work every week, say 3 days a week or something.
Right.
They've got schedules where you take off one time and you are gone 2 weeks and come back. They've got schedules where you fly out week on, week off. And that's the type of schedules I tried to fly once I moved back to my hometown, because it's a 2-hour drive.
Right.
And I would drive in and I would be gone a week, and then I'd drive back and then I'd be home a week.
Right. So you did that obviously for how long were you at FedEx?
I flew for FedEx for 26 years and 8 months.
And then you retired at that point. Why 26 years, 8 months, and not just 27 years?
Just because of the incentives offered to retire in December.
Okay. What year was that?
86. Not 80, 16.
16. I was
16.
about to say 86. You were
2016.
So
I retired in 2016.
Retired 2016. All right. Now, as far as obviously we know each other through masonry, and when did you become a Mason?
I became a Mason in 1998. I was raised in March of 1998.
Where at?
Huntington Lodge.
Okay. And that's where you've been, that's your home lodge ever since then. So that was when you had came back from, that was right around the time that you got out, right? I mean, not, about 8 years.
It was 8 years after I got out.
So had some time to kind of have a non-Masonic life. But your dad was a Mason,
Yeah.
right? Was he a Mason long before that?
Yes.
Yeah.
He became a Mason in 61.
Okay. So you knew that he was a Mason.
Well, yes, I did, but I didn't really know anything about it. And
Right.
back then, they wouldn't talk about it.
Right.
There are people in that age group, their sons never knew they were Masons.
Right. Yeah. I hear it all the time now. That
Yeah.
My grandfather was a Mason. He never
They
talked to me about
never
it.
knew it because they didn't talk about it.
No.
They would go to the lodge, but they'd never talk about what they did. You know, of course, they couldn't talk too much about what they did, but they never talked about the fraternity.
Right.
It was a big secret. And I think the big thing is people didn't understand what they could talk about.
Right.
They knew there was secret stuff that they weren't supposed to talk about,
Yeah.
but they didn't talk about any of it because they didn't know what they could talk about.
Right. Yeah, I tell people all the time that I hear some of the negative things that they hear about Freemasonry.
Yeah.
And how they think that, we're the Illuminati or
Yeah.
we're part of this New World Order. And I tell them, first things, we have a hard time planning a pancake breakfast. We're just like anybody else. While we do have secrets per se, if I told you what the secrets were, it's funny. If you think about it, it's kind of funny. It's not something that, I'm embarrassed that my wife would see or that my mother would see or anything like that. But to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but to me, one of the best parts about the secrets is that if one day you decide to join and you're obviously not a Mason, then I didn't spoil anything for you. You get to come in, free of any kind of preconceptions or notions or anything like that.
Well, that depends on the person. There are a lot of people that get out there and read stuff on the internet Of course, everything on the internet is right?
Yeah, 100%.
Everything is true.
That's right.
But the secrets, it's just like anything. Like me flying the U-2.
Right.
You can go online and find out all kinds of information about the U-2, but you don't know which part of it is correct.
Right.
Which part of it is true.
That's like anything
That's
in
the
life.
same. That's true.
Yeah.
And it's the same with masonry. People go online and read all this stuff, but there's a lot of people out there writing stuff just to get back at masonry for something they've done to them.
Right.
If they got kicked out of masonry, they write negative stuff about masonry.
Right.
And there's a lot of it that's not true, but people read it and they don't know what's true and what's not. They get their preconceived notions, even though they didn't talk to a Mason.
Right. Yeah, I think it's. I think that is the exact same scenario for every single thing that you read online. Everything.
It is.
The thing about it is that if I were to tell you everything that happened in there or inside the lodge, and then put that all online, but then I also told you a bunch of stuff that didn't happen inside there, how do you decipher what's right and what's wrong?
Yeah.
Same thing with our mainstream media. They put all these stories out. There's a lot of disinformation in there, but it's hard to decipher the disinformation from the information. And that's, I think, the bigger problem is that we have so much disinformation that you never will be able to figure out what's exactly true and what's not.
There's no fact reporting anymore.
No.
Everything is slanted one way or another. So there is no such thing as pure news anymore.
Yeah.
It's all opinion.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly why I wanted to do stuff like this, because you can talk to people that are well informed about what they do or what they've been through, and you have their perspective of it. Then you form your own perspective of it, just like Freemasonry. The lessons that are taught through Freemasonry, you may take one thing from it, I may take something different from it. Mm-hmm. Every time I go to a degree, I hear something different, or it makes me think about something differently. Yep. Something that I'm going through in life, something that has recently happened that it makes me think, maybe I should think about that. Things that you hear that you thought were worded one way, and now you've heard it differently, and you're like, in my mind, if I just put a comma here, that makes more sense to me. Yep. So I think that, especially for the brethren, it's important to, when we make jokes amongst each other or with each other, it's one thing because we know what's fact and what's fiction. But when you're around other people who are non-Masons, certain jokes, are not funny.
Right.
Because a guy who's coming in the door hears one thing and, is now no longer interested because we were making a joke that he doesn't know is not a joke. So it's super important for me to tell people, I can tell you all the time how important Freemasonry is to me, what it's meant to me personally, what it's done for me, in my mind, in my heart, in my personal life, in my business life, how it's helped me grow. I can tell you all of that stuff, but you won't know any of it until you decide to take that step yourself.
Right.
Because everybody goes through everybody gets something different from it.
Right. It's different for everybody.
So what made you decide to actually join when you did? It's 8 years after you've finished your military career. I think a lot of military guys join in the military or shortly after because that friendship, that brotherly love, that camaraderie.
Well, there is a lot of camaraderie in the military, and especially in the group that I was in when I was in. And I didn't see that outside. And I didn't really I wasn't exposed much to the Masonic Lodge.
Right. Oh, as a kid you weren't?
As a kid or even in the military. I didn't know it was around.
Yeah.
And then after I got out and was living back at home, some of the guys that I saw and knew that were in the Masonic Lodge, then that's when I decided that it's something I might want to get into.
Yeah. And so you went down to the lodge. And for people that don't know, the whole process of becoming a Mason is typically find a lodge, or you know a Mason, you talk to them, you have to ask to join.
Right.
A lot of people, I hear all the time,
Masons
like,
cannot ask
that's right.
people to join.
I hear
And
from
that's
people
what people
all the
don't
time.
understand.
Yeah, they want to say, oh, I got some guys that have been trying to recruit me and blah, blah. And I say, listen, that's not supposed to happen.
Yeah.
That's not how it works. You have to ask. The first place you want to become a Mason is in your heart. So it has to be of your own, free will that you make that decision, and not anybody else's decision to make for you. Mm-hmm. So, you knew some guys.
Well, I knew some guys. I was going to church with some guys. One of them I went to school with.
Yeah.
We played Little League baseball. We were Cub Scouts together, and we went through school together, graduated together. And the preacher of the church that we were going to was a Mason. And those are the two people that I talked to about getting in.
Okay. And so you went down a petition, and obviously the rest is history from there. How long did it take you to become a master?
I was master in 2009.
Well, I mean, as far as a master Mason.
Master Mason?
Yeah.
I was initiated in January and raised in March.
Okay.
So about the minimum time between 3 degrees.
And a lot of people don't realize that, too, is that if you become what we call proficient, if you're able to remember your lectures, you're able to advance and become a master Mason, because there are 3 steps, 3 degrees going in. This is not secret knowledge. This is definitely something that is open to everybody. But then once you've become a master, then you decide whether you want to have a leadership role, or if you just want to, regularly attend and be a part of functions and stuff like that. So you were raised in 98. When did you say you became a master? Master of the lodge? 09.
And the reason, with my schedule, I was not able to attend lodge all the time.
That's right.
But in 2005, my son asked to join.
Oh.
And at that point, I decided I wanted to be part of his degrees.
Okay.
So I was his senior deacon in all 3 of his degrees. And then once I started that, then I started learning the other spots and attending Grand Lodge and trying to maneuver my schedule so I could get off for that. And then I was master in 2009 and 10. And then I was in the York Rite. I'm in the Scottish Rite and York Rite also. I was high priest in my chapter in 2011. I was illustrious master in my council in 2012. I was also an appointed grand officer in 2012 in the Grand Council. And then in 2013, I was an appointed grand officer in the Eastern Star and also in the Grand Chapter of Royal Arch Masons. And then in 14 and 15, I was the commander of my commandery, and I was an appointed grand officer in the commandery in 15.
What drew you to become so, I don't want to say spread out, but you're well traveled. You've been in the appendant bodies, so like you had said, York Rite, Scottish Rite, Eastern Star, Shriners, Tall Cedars, the Grotto, all of that. Those are all, well, not the Grotto, but those are all appendant bodies, right? So I explain it to people that the trunk of the tree is the Blue Lodge. Yeah. That's your home lodge. That's where you're raised. That's where you become a Mason.
Yes.
Then all these branches off of it are appendant bodies. So what made you decide to? I mean, I understand wanting to go through the chairs and become the master of the lodge, but what made you decide, like, I'm going to start doing these appendant bodies?
Well, there's a lot of Masonic light out there that will be available. We always say we take good men and make them better.
Right.
We can't do that. We can give them the tools to help themselves do that. Mm. And the more Masonic light you get, the more tools you have to make yourself a better person.
Right.
And each one of those appendant bodies has more Masonic light that's available to get.
Yeah.
And that's why I went through those bodies, so that I could get that Masonic light.
Yeah. And Masonic Light
Knowledge.
is just knowledge.
Yes,
knowledge. And it's because it's all very philosophical.
Yeah.
I mean, it is what you're making of the information that you're being provided. And the information is not secrets of the world. It's not what people might have misconceptions of. We are just normal men who are trying to live the best life that we can, not for just ourselves, but for our families and the other men that we surround ourselves with.
And all the moral lessons that are taught in Masonry come from the Holy Bible.
They do. And so I tell people all the time, we're not a religion. We don't talk about politics. We don't talk about religion either. But there are, most of our rule and guide comes directly out of the Bible. So there's a lot of basic instruction. So for those that don't know, you have to believe in a higher power to become a Mason. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to have the same thoughts that you do or that I do, or we're not aligned. There's going to be Muslim Masons. There's going to be Jewish Masons, Masons from all different, Catholics, Presbyterians, all that.
There are certain bodies that are Christian
right
in nature, but the rest of them are not associated with any particular religion.
Right. And so it's not it's not something going into it where you have to be directly following a certain path.
Right.
It's really open to everybody that is of a belief of a higher power.
And it encourages everybody to practice their own religion.
Exactly. And so if you were to give anybody advice today that came to you and said, hey, buddy, I saw your ring. Are you a Mason? I'd like to learn more about it. What would you say to them?
Well, what do you know about it?
Oh, that's a good question.
And where did you get the information?
Okay.
That's what I'd like to find out.
Yeah.
Because if they know something about it, they've obviously found it somewhere.
Right.
But if they found it on some of those blogs that are written by people that don't like Masonry,
Right.
then their information is incorrect.
Right. So now, in this point of your Masonic career, is that how you say it?
Yeah.
Masonic career. I'm
Yeah.
still a newer. I have it tattooed on my arm, but I'm 3 years this year, and there's a brother at our lodge when I got this tattoo, and he said, "You're like a walking banner for Freemasonry," And I said, "This isn't for everyone. I get that, but anybody that's ever heard me talk about Masonry knows how important it has been to my life. Literally. I mean, my first child, it took us 12 years to have our first child. I met another Mason while I was building my first business when we moved to Tennessee.
Yeah.
We're not from here.
Yeah.
And I get emotional talking about it, so I hope I don't
Yeah.
have tears run out. But so I met another Mason, had a conversation with him about, oh, I see you have a ring, you're a Mason, and he said, oh, I am a Mason. Are you a Mason? And I said, no, but, I knew a Mason in my previous state, and I was interested in joining, but, I told him I was more agnostic. I believed in a higher power. I didn't necessarily know what it was. We didn't grow up in church, and I just kind of didn't know where we go with that, and so he said, well, you believe in a higher power? I said, I do. And he said, well, I invite you to come and sit down and talk to some of the other brothers in our lodge and, see what you think about it. And so I did. And that was during COVID, which was a whole different ball game, right? So I just found out when I had petitioned the lodge that my wife was pregnant for the first time. And I had just quit my day job, was starting this business, and the business was entertainment. So it wasn't something that was necessary. There was I was terrified. And I remember her telling me she was pregnant, and I thought, all these years, we've wanted this baby, and it didn't happen. And now, at the worst time in our life, with the state of the world, and we just started a business, and we no longer have a savings, like, how could this happen right now? And then Masonry was really like my safety net. encouragement from the brethren. Even though my first almost year, I think I petitioned in June of 20, and the Grand Master at the time had decided, I think the month after, that they were going to shut down everything.
Yeah.
Because they were going to have the stated meeting, and said the brother who I had been spending most of my time with had said, "Hey, we're going to go to our stated meeting tonight, and we're going to talk about setting a degree date for you. What works for you?" And I said, "Any night, I'm available, and whatever works for you guys, I'm available." And he had to call me, and I thought he was calling me to tell me, "Hey, we're set."
Yeah.
But instead, he called me to tell me that the Grand Master had shut down all work, and so we were not going to do anything. So for almost the next year, every month, I would go and sit with them for dinner, and that was it. And then April, I think, of 21, that's when, in March, Tennessee has their Grand Lodge. We got a new Grand Master. He opened it back up. And, when I went through that first degree, one of the things that I guess would be mystery, but I think is true, and it's not something secretive, but you are concealed with vision. You can't see anything. Well, at the time, the Grand Master that we had said, "Listen, we're going to open everything back up, but you need to pay attention to what your county health department says. If they say you got to wear masks, you got to wear masks." And so, obviously in the lodge, you got brothers that feel one way, you got brothers that feel the other way, but everybody, that's the best part about it, is everybody is good to come together. We all we don't have conflict like that. So, of course, I wore a mask. And at the time, I don't know if you remember when you first met me, because it was around not long after that, but I had a very, very large beard at the time. And I had this mask over my face, over my mouth. And then I couldn't see anything.
Yeah.
It was pitch black. Yeah. I could see nothing. And I was not one of those that did a lot of research about Freemasonry. I didn't want to know good or bad. I wanted to go into it with an open mind. And I remember in part of the degree, I remember all of a sudden seeing something, and I was, "What is that?" And I was basically hallucinating that I was seeing a white snake in front of me. It's so weird to say, but that's what I saw. Yeah. And not long after that, I was brought to light. And then everything was fine. And it's weird because I love to tell that story, and only other Masons really can understand it, because only you and I know what brought to light is and all that. And so it just is it's a weird transition to make from feeling like you're seeing something and something happened. And anyways, it just became one of the greatest things for me. And I loved it. And so my Masonic career is very young. And I still think your Masonic career is very young, because from being a master of your lodge, where you really start gaining a ton of knowledge, because all the chairs, you're learning something more. But by the time you make it to the East, there's a lot that you're intaking. So you've made it to the East. You've gone through all these appendant bodies. And now you at some point have joined the Grand Lodge, the line in the Grand Lodge, which is similar to your home lodge, except for it's from the first seat, it's 4 seats until you become the Grand Master of your state. And I have to explain this to people all the time, that Freemasonry is individually done by state. Right. So the state of Tennessee has a Grand Lodge, the state of Mississippi has a Grand Lodge, right. But England is England Grand Lodge. It's not like, a small London has a Grand Lodge, and then I forgive me, I don't know a bunch of cities in England, but Scotland probably has its own Grand Lodge, and what have you. So, but since we're done individually by states, we have our own grand line, and now you have stepped into that, and so 4 years basically from the time you start, technically you'll be the Grand Master of the state. So that's where you're at now. So you obviously started about 4 years ago, because this month you become the Grand Master of Tennessee.
If I'm elected.
If you're elected, which I find it hard to believe that you would not be elected. Well, I think you're very well respected. You're right. You never know, because things can happen. But Are you anticipating that is the course? Have you prepared yourself to be Grandmaster of the state of
I
Tennessee?
prepared the way that I've prepared either way.
Right.
But yeah, I've tried to prepare to become Grandmaster if it happens.
Yeah. And how does it feel to know that you're fixing to be the head of the whole Masonic organization in the state of Tennessee?
Very humbling.
Yeah. Well, you're a very humble man, buddy.
We had a practice for our officer installation a couple weeks ago,
Yeah.
and a past Grandmaster from Knoxville area came down. He's going to be the installing officer. He came down to Huntington Lodge on a Sunday afternoon to practice.
Mm-hmm.
And when he got up there and to give, we're going through the practice and going through the obligation, and he actually went through the obligation, and that was, I don't know, it just struck me right then. This is about to be real.
Yeah. It's I can't imagine what you're feeling for it.
Yeah.
You've experienced a lot in life, just in general, and to know that this is such a high achievement for us, and for any Mason that's listening, it's 100% possible, because here you were, somebody who didn't get started. You weren't an 18-year-old kid that joined the lodge, and you didn't have all the time to devote to the lodge when you first joined. And then when you did have the time, you did it where you could. And now you're fixing to sit in the highest seat.
This is not something that I aspired for either. It's not something I went searching for.
Yeah, it just kind of happened.
Yeah.
When you got the nomination, when you knew that going into the Grand Line was actually going to happen, did it sink in at all then that, hey, it's very possible in 4 years from now?
No.
Who was the Grandmaster then?
Then was Robert Reed.
Okay. And so you were just like, well, if it happens, it happens.
The same time that I went into the bottom of the line, Charlie Mixon became Grandmaster.
Oh, that's right. That's right. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Well,
that's the way the rotation works.
Right. Yeah, because explain the rotation.
All right. We have 3 separate parts of the state.
Right.
And it rotates from, in the order of, east, or middle, east, and west. And whenever the Grand Master is installed as Grand Master, the junior Grand Warden who comes in is from his part of the state.
Okay.
Now, in West Tennessee, we divided into 2. We divided into Memphis and surrounding area and outside Memphis.
Right.
So Charlie was from Memphis.
Right.
So I came into the bottom of the line as outside of Memphis, but it's still West Tennessee.
Right.
In Middle Tennessee, it's just Middle Tennessee.
Right.
In East Tennessee, they actually divide theirs into 3 different sections. They have an upper, middle, and lower east.
Oh.
So they rotate each time that comes around. The guy going to the bottom of the line in East Tennessee comes from a different area.
Now, is this a written
No, it's
rule?
not written.
It's just kind of an understood.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's just an understood.
Because there are a lot of rules
Yeah.
in Masonry. We have a lot of bylaws, and so we follow by a lot of things. But so the person that is going to be going into the junior warden spot coming this year, I don't know if that's not public knowledge, but I don't know if does the whole state know who's?
Well, there's one person that we know of that's going to be nominated.
Right.
And his biography went out to everybody.
Okay. So which is cool because Tony is from my lodge, and so it's very interesting to know that I'm sitting here talking to you about that, about what it was like when you went in as Grand Junior Warden, and now he's going to be going possibly into that spot. So we could have been having the same conversation 4 years from now. As far as you possibly going in, everything goes as planned and you become Grand Master. What are your aspirations for this year? Do you have goals that you've already come up with?
Yes. I think we need to continue the things that Jim Arnhart has put out. guarding the West Gate.
And he's the current grandmaster.
He's the current grandmaster.
Right.
And he had us talk about those things last year. We need to guard the West Gate and get the right people in masonry. We're not looking for numbers. We should look for quality.
Right.
And then we need to stress education. I would like to encourage every lodge to have some type of education at their stated meeting.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be a long program, but just some type of education. And we're working on some things with the education committee that are going to come out that I think most people will like. And then we also have a mentoring program that we need to work on. We need to try to use the mentoring program and try to mentor new Masons.
Right.
Try to mentor lodge officers,
Right.
and that's also coming out through the education committee because there's a real good program in Middle Tennessee. There's a wardens conference there.
Yeah, we talked about that.
Yeah,
Yeah, we definitely want to bring that over to West Tennessee.
yeah.
And I
I
know
want to try to get that statewide if I can.
Yeah.
I'm not going to mandate that everybody gets involved with it, but I think once people see what it is,
Mm-hmm.
they will become interested in it and want to participate.
Yeah. I mean, it's tough when for me, I'm currently the junior warden in my lodge. Well, I skipped 2 chairs.
Yeah.
And they, one was the senior steward and the other one was the junior deacon. And, so I skipped both those chairs. Well, you learn a lot in those chairs that you don't realize how much you're learning, how much you're paying attention to. And then when you miss those chairs, it's really a game of catch up. And it depends on your lodge, how easy it is for you to transition. Mm-hmm. And that program that you were talking about is a fantastic program to help you get the knowledge that you need to become a good leader of your lodge.
Now, on top of that,
those
3 things, the most worshipful Brother Jim Arnhart started. I'd like to get those expanded. But masonry is a family affair.
Right.
I'd like to bring the families back in some, have his dinners with families, have the families involved with things that we have outside of tile meetings.
Right.
The last couple of years we haven't had district meetings, or we did last year, but the year before that and the year before that we didn't have district meetings. The families were not involved in our activities at all.
Right.
And I want to get them involved. A lodge is like a family. The more you meet together, the more you are around each other, the closer you'll become.
Right.
And the more successful you will be as a lodge, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have the Masonic family. We have all the appendant bodies. I think if a person does not go through those appendant bodies, that they're depriving themselves of those tools that we were talking about to make themselves better.
Right.
And I think we need to support them, but we also need to remember that we always need to support our Blue Lodge.
Right.
Part of the Masonic family is our youth organizations. We need to support them. And I'm trying to get some type of exposure at every district meeting that we have.
And that's for like D-Malay
and Rainbow
Girls.
Yeah.
Right.
And we're also trying to get the 10-chip program working again.
Yeah. Yeah, and for those that don't know, the 10-chip program is amazing. And I think that, again, because we're masonry and people don't know enough about us, I think people are always scared of what they don't know.
Yeah.
And you see something like, hey, we have this program where you can come in and bring your children. They can get fingerprints. They can get, their picture taken. And this is a database that will...
DNA even.
Yeah, and DNA that will be kept in case something were to happen to them. In case they were to go missing or something like that. This is going to help us.
And we don't get it.
And we don't get any of
that stuff.
We're just basically the
we just
forefront.
collect that for them so that they've got it.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's such a great program.
Yeah,
and
it
it's
is.
easy, it's fast, and
It is.
when I do Santa at the lodge, I'm like, hey, let's set the 10-chip up. Let's make sure we get that done because we're going to be seeing a ton of kids anyways, or hopefully. Let's go ahead and make that happen, make it a possibility because, like you said, it's such a great program and we really need to utilize it.
Yeah.
Because we're here.
Well, if they fell by the wayside because of COVID and different
Right.
things, and we lost a lot of the equipment that we had with it, and we're trying to get that back. That equipment's probably all out of date anyway, though. We just need to try to get it back going again, and we can get some exposure.
Right. Well, I think that I think it's a great thing for us to do. So we'll have to definitely get it back going. But as far as Grand Lodge coming up, you have to spend the whole week there.
I'm going to be there all week.
Yeah.
We're going on Saturday.
Oh, the Saturday before?
We're going the Saturday before. Of course, the Yorkright, we have a Vesper service or memorial service on Sunday afternoon, followed by the Yorkright banquet on Sunday night. And then the Grand Chapter opens on Monday morning, the Grand Council on Monday afternoon. And then there's the chair degrees for the chapter and council, the Order of the High Priesthood, and the Order of the Silver Trowel that go on Monday night. Tuesday, the Grand Commandery opens, and then there's some bodies that meet in that afternoon, and then Tuesday night, the Grand Master's Banquet, Wednesday, Grand Lodge, Thursday, Grand Lodge. So,
yeah,
I'll
be there
week.
Tuesday morning through. Well, we made it a point this year. Everybody that I know that's going has made it a point to make sure we stay through installation. We're all very proud of you, buddy. Is super excited to see what you do for your year in the East, and we're thankful for your friendship and your brotherhood. And I watch you travel to all these different lodges, and on several occasions have been able to sit and have just a meal with you, or sit in a lodge with you, be super nervous to do degree work with you, which is so funny because the first time we did a degree together, it was in Bolivar. I don't know if you remember it, but I remember you sitting in the West, and I was the deacon, the senior deacon, and I definitely messed up what I was supposed to say, and I just was so nervous. Not only because I think it was one of the first times I did it. I had practiced so many times, but it was one of the first times I did it. But just to know that you were sitting 5 feet away from me, and I knew you knew exactly what was supposed to be said, and I just was nervous. But at the end of it, you didn't stop me during it. You didn't pull me to the side at the end and say, "This is how you need to, you need to do better," or you messed it up, and blah blah blah. You just said, "So here's some things that you could do, and just relax. It's not a big deal, and they're not going to know the difference. And the more times you do this, the better you get at it.
Yeah.
And you did a good job, so don't worry about it." And that was it. And I needed that so bad at that time. And so it's just been, I sit in lodges with people like yourself and Charlie and Joe Harrison and on a regular basis. And I think that what a lot of Masons don't realize is that we're all meeting on the level.
Yeah.
We talk about it a lot, but it is hard to understand that when you're sitting across the table from the potential Grand Master, to think, hey, we're the same. We're just in different areas of our Masonic career.
Yeah.
Everything else is the exact same. So, that's one thing I encourage anybody to realize, is that people like yourself are not unapproachable, no matter how stoic they may seem. It's easy to talk to anybody. All you have to do is reach out, and they're all willing to help. So it's one of the greatest things about the fraternity. So, well, listen, we'll wrap it up.
Okay.
I really appreciate you coming in. I'm super excited to see you at the end of the month. Big deal. We're just really, we're all proud of you, and can't wait to see what you do. So,
Thank you.
all right. That's it.
Okay.
All right.